The suburbs near the Daze dungeon were much more peaceful than the city center, where the Nara Group Alliance's house and the arena were. Here, there were acreages, towers with expansive gardens, and estates that showed off the power of the mythic rank guild leaders, but without the crowds of the city. It was almost peaceful, if you could ignore the power emanating from every direction. It wasn't anything that would bother Carl or Dana at mythic rank, but certainly different from the common practice in the city, where everyone restrained their auras unless they were in an argument. Out here, they used the aura to show off their status. Even the white dragon let his aura loose as soon as they exited the portal. He gave Carl and Dana an odd look as they followed behind. "Are you not going to announce your presence?" he asked. Dana smirked as Carl let loose his aura, a disturbing presence that combined predatory danger with the unnatural otherness of chaos. The feeling made the dragon frown, and everyone nearby turned to look at them. Carl's aura was not the warm and welcoming sort of aura that most guild masters had. Guild leaders usually had a presence that would draw people to them. But Carl's aura felt more like a declaration of war until he muted it to a third of its usual intensity, and it just felt bestial and confident. "I see what the problem is. Your aura is too intense. I take it that you don't do much recruiting?" the dragon asked. Carl shrugged. "I am good at recruitment. I just don't try to impress them with my aura. If we need that, I have a Dana mage." Dana let a bit more of her aura slip, the gentle and alluring aura of a divine fox, coupled with the crackling intensity of a powerful mage. "Oh yes, that is much better for recruitment. No wonder the blue dragons flock to you. Such an interesting couple. But the dungeon is right here, we can enter at will." The crowd chatting near the dungeon entrance parted as Carl approached, then began to gossip as they saw who was with him. "Oh, it looks like the fool found someone to test his theory. Do you think that they can even survive?" one of the bystanders whispered, not quite low enough that Carl and Dana couldn't hear him. "Didn't you sense his aura? That man is terrifying. The intimidation effect of the fallen seraphim won't mean anything if he's immune to it. That might be what they're planning," another whispered back. Carl smiled, realizing that the major issue with the dungeon was an effect that he was immune to. With his resistance, even without adding buffs, it was nearly impossible to intimidate him. And if he activated an intimidation effect of his own, or had Ray active, then the two would counteract each other. They had this one in the bag. Carl checked that he was the group leader before stepping inside the dungeon, only to be met with a most interesting message. "Group size invalid. Split group into a solo and a duo challenge." The dragon looked shocked while Dana smiled. "It looks like we get our wish. New dungeon time it is. You go solo, I will take our new friend through the duo challenge," she suggested. "Are you sure that is wise? It might not make the dungeon easier just because it's a smaller group," the cleric stammered. "It most certainly won't. In fact, it might increase it. But I am confident that with a healer at my side, I can take on the challenge. Though I might be the better-looking half of our relationship, I'm no slouch in combat." Dana joked. "Tian is fluffier," Kara informed her. Dana rolled her eyes at the badger's mental teasing. "If you're sure," the cleric slowly agreed. "Then it's done. System, I will go solo, they will do the duo challenge," Carl announced. Then he was alone in the dungeon, looking out at a hellscape of scorched buildings, boiling pits that appeared to be full of blood, and black-winged seraphim. "Rewards degrade every 10 minutes. Begin." Carl called out the whole team, and Ray immediately began to celebrate. These pits really were full of boiling mythic-ranked blood, both light and dark element. It was like a hot spring resort in here. If you were a bloodbath spider. She called out her golems and undead army, while Carl called all his summons, choosing Carnage as his epic golems. The big demon would be a great choice for fighting fallen seraphim, and he didn't object to having Kara sit on his shoulder as he charged into combat. She was like a furry, chaotic mascot who would fly off to find him more things to fight. "You're going to have to run, or he's going to get away from you." Remy laughed from her alchemy lab. Indeed, Carnage didn't need directions. He knew just what to do in this situation. Kill everything that moved. The dungeon monsters looked horrified as the pair of massive demons charged at them with 24 spectral knights behind them, and a small army of golems struggling to keep up. I need to make a new bow, Carl realized. There were so many summoned beasts now that it was nearly impossible to get into close combat. Even Ray had taken her team and gone ahead to get more monsters to fight, as they couldn't all fight in one spot. So Carl focused on Frozen Apocalypse to bypass the fire damage reduction that the Fallen Seraphim had. Hawk appeared from his space and flew off to the side, inspecting the flaming stones and the bubbling blood pools, while collecting samples for Ray. He might not be mythic yet, but he could still help his sister so she didn't have to take time out from fighting. However, there was something about this place. A feeling of rightness. There was fire, but not pure fire. Fire with a little something extra, and that extra was calling to Hawk on a primal level. Carl grabbed the Epic Guard and let the Haint Claw teleport them both to an open space, where Ray and her team were finishing with a group of Fallen Seraphim. That gave him a clear line of sight to the next two groups, and Carl shifted Frozen Apocalypse to get their attention and move the monsters their direction so that Ray and Carnage could keep fighting. The Spider and the Wrath Demon had a friendly rivalry going on, and Carnage was actually laughing as Ray used blood destruction to cause a particularly wounded attacker to explode before it could reach them. They were both here purely for the enjoyment of making things die in new and innovative ways, and that had forged an instant bond of friendship between them. While Carl was focused on the fight, Hawk was busy understanding the world. He was so close that he could feel it. However, there was something holding him back, and he couldn't seem to break past the limitation. That was it. He was still a windspeed Hawk in some ways, but as much as he had grown, there was no room left in his development path for the baby bird that he had once been. He needed to purge it from himself and come back as the Hawk that he knew he could be. The question was how? No, he knew how. Sister Ray did it all the time. A long gout of fire lit one of the blood pools into a raging inferno of unholy energy and life essence, just as Hawk dove headfirst into the raging inferno. There was no hesitation, no reason for Carl to be alarmed, until suddenly, he felt Hawk's energy being violently ripped apart, as if his body was being immolated by an impossible fire. It shouldn't be happening. Even if it was a mythic rank flame, Hawk had been incorporeal when he entered, and his immunity to fire was nearly complete even when he wasn't. Plus, this was a fire that Hawk had set himself. His own flames wouldn't hurt him, even if the secondary fires from something he burnt theoretically could. Hawk's joyful cry echoed through the dungeon as the inferno of vital energy he had ignited seared away his body, leaving only condensed soul energy and ghost fire. Then, he found himself back in his ghost fire tree, in his space. Everything was blurry for some reason, but when he sucked in the vital essence and other energies from the dungeon, he could feel his body reforming, so he had not failed. The power imbalance was enough to alert everyone, including the dungeon bosses, that something was seriously wrong in this place. The four-winged Fallen Seraphim secret keeper nearest them left the designated boss platform and flew over, desperate to stop whatever was happening. But Hawk was in his space, inaccessible to anyone else as he completed his reformation process. Carl didn't miss that Hawk's space was shifting. The bird hadn't just drawn in the vital essence of the blood lake that he had set on fire. He had drawn in everything. The soul energy, the unholy nature of the fallen seraphim whose blood had formed the lake, and the innately unholy flames of the dungeon setting itself. He was currently a ghostly blue egg in his favorite tree, surrounded in black miasma that swirled as the egg continued to pull in as much mana as it could get. Then, the egg cracked, and with a screeching keen, Hawk emerged, soaring into the sky of his space, trailing a cloud of energy behind his ghostly black flaming body like a comet. Evolution 3 activation complete. Ghostfire Thunderbird Dark Flame Phoenix. New skills gained. Dark Flame. Rebirth. Unholy Corrosion. Dark Flame Unholy Elemental Fire. Deals fire and soul damage. Deals extra damage to holy targets. Rebirth. When the Dark Flame Phoenix is destroyed, it is reborn from the core feather left at its nest. Unholy Corrosion passive skill. Fire attacks cause lingering damage immune to holy element healing. Hawk, fundamental rule comprehension. fire 80%. Hawk burst free of his space and began to absorb as much energy from the dungeon as possible, using the dying fallen seraphim as fuel to finish his evolution and advancement. He was at the mythic rank now, but it was still settling into him, as his body was still unstable in its new form, freshly hatched and reborn. Sister Ray's method had been right all along, Hawk realized. He just needed to burn the water out of the blood so he could get at the trapped energy. The fallen seraphim boss took to the air, intent on destroying this profane monster that was attempting to drain their home of its essence. But Hawk was fast, and he wasn't the only one that could fly. Kara and Carl both leapt into the air to meet the boss, giving Hawk a few more precious seconds to adapt to his new body before he had to help them deal with the boss. Sparks flew as the Sword of Champions met with the unholy blade of the fallen seraphim boss, and Hawk became a low-priority target. First, the Secret Keeper needed to deal with the monster man who had challenged him. Flames surrounded the boss, and eternal lightning crackled around Carl as the two clashed in an explosion of conflicting elements. Holy and unholy couldn't exist in the same space, and the backlash of the two attacks meeting was destroying the buildings beneath their fight, to the point that the Haint Claw voluntarily chose to merge with Carl, just so she didn't have to deal with flying bricks anymore. The extra damage and attack speed from the Haint Claw merger was enough to give Carl the advantage in physical skills, and the boss found that it could no longer escape to go hunt that damnable bird. But that was fine. It would deal with this man first, and then it would go find the bird. It had no idea what had happened to attract this menace to its home, but it was not going to allow this insult to stand. The fallen seraphim huffed as Carl kicked it in the chest, gaining a bit of space to attack from a new angle. The others were quickly clearing the additional fights beneath them, while Carl's fight with the boss seemed ready to tear the dungeon itself apart. Something about the restrictions on the dungeon had changed, as the other seraphim only flew enough to launch themselves into combat, but the boss had not only left his platform, but he was fighting in the sky and damaging the actual dungeon. That was not normal. The visitors to the dungeon could damage it, but the occupants never did. "You, monster man, I will end you today," the boss promised. Big words for someone who hasn't even faced the Chaos Badger yet. Carl joked, panting with exertion from the extended fight. Kara had joined him in the air, but other than firing off a few attacks at the back of the boss to keep him distracted, most of her work had been to supplement Hawk's role of aerial bombardment on the main force's fight. Rewards degraded, the dungeon informed them. That meant they had been in here 10 minutes now. Not long, but longer than Carl had expected to be facing the first boss. Further down the dungeon, Hawk lit an entire street with eerie black fire that made the wings of the fallen seraphim glow. The beasts were almost to the final boss now, and it was behaving perfectly normally. As long as Carl could hold this one in place, they could finish the run and then come back if he hadn't completed the fight. The boss realized the same thing, and began working his attack angles so that they would be closer to the group with every engagement, but Carl's speed was enough that the progress was minimal. The best that the fallen seraphim could do was to break away and dart below Carl's range of attack, gaining a few dozen meters before Carl was on him again and forced the fight to the ground. Now, their skills were even more evenly matched, as the boss had lost the advantage of skill with three-dimensional fighting. "I really need to get Dana to write me up a combat-style book at some point. There has to be one that I can use," he thought while Kara laughed in his mind. There was no way that Carl could fight like the Dana mage. For one, his leg wouldn't even lift that high, he couldn't do most of the kicks. Plus, it was made for someone with auto-parry, and Carl didn't know that skill either. "Ooh, we could get a new sister who fights like a human. That could work," Ray suggested. They already had the Haint Claw and the Epic Guard, but her fighting style wasn't a skill. Well, maybe they just weren't proper sisters? One was a weapon and the other was summoned, so they might not count. The Haint Claw did try to help Carl understand fighting styles, but his body wasn't built like the Haint was, and the weapon's fighting style required limbs that bent in multiple directions. The boss was slowing as the number of injuries added up, but the rest of the group was already on the other boss of the dungeon, and it was falling fast under the immense weight of their combined attacks. The Greater Fallen Seraphim, as Carl dubbed the four-winged versions, were lightning quick and incredibly skilled fighters. Even Carnage couldn't get the upper hand on them in battle. Not even 2-on-1. But there were 24 other golems involved, as well as 3 beasts, and that left no escape. The death of the last remaining target brought a shift in the energy of the dungeon, as if its resistance to Hawk's efforts to drain it had been removed. All that was left was Carl and 1 battered fallen seraphim, in a hellscape where not a single building was left standing, and the life essence of the blood pools was rapidly draining into the freshly evolved dark flame phoenix. "You fought well," Carl commended the boss as Kara approached from the back. "As did you," the creature replied. Then, its power soared, and erupted as the boss sacrificed itself with an immolation-style attack, blanketing the entire dungeon in unholy fire. Eternal lightning fell under the force of the attack, and Carl felt the bestial raiment armor spell beginning to melt before he got the defensive spell back up over the group, and his healing kicked in to mend the blistered and charred flesh under scorched fur. February 10th. Fun to watch, smells awful. Do not recommend. Kara commented as the last ashes of the boss floated through the air. Solo challenge complete. 2 time-based penalties applied. Calculating rewards. Carl sighed in relief, then focused on Dana, who was currently fighting monsters on the way to the second boss. She was doing well, with the healer keeping her from needing to expend excessive amounts of mana on her golems. She was also taking the opportunity to take on a role as a frontline fighter, which she very rarely got to do. It was a good opportunity to work on her stamina and keep up with her combat skills so that they didn't get rusty from disuse. She might be too strong for the arena, but that didn't mean that there was no more need for her to train. Reward granted, Skill Book of Unholy Beast Transformation Beast Master Subclass Exclusive. Grants an epic grade beast or beastkin form of the unholy element. Tion frowned at the book in Carl's hands. That was the exact opposite of what they needed. But it was an epic grade skill, so it would give an epic grade body to the transformed user, even if it was just a crappy unholy beast. Try it out. Let's see what the Carl can turn into, Kara suggested. Carl used the skill and activated the Unholy Beast transformation. Determining form, Beast Demon Crow. Demi-Beast Tengu. The Tengu species were a form of crow demon, as Carl recalled, with large black wings. So, the 2 forms were related, with one being the beastkin form of the animal. Which made him wonder, if he gave this to Dana, would it let her turn into a demonic fox? Small and black and fluffy? That sounded rather cuddly. Tion frowned. That did sound cuddly. But unholy was still the opposite of what they were going for. She should be a divine fox, not a fallen fox. Carl let the beasts argue about the merits of holy versus unholy beasts, while Hawk tested out the new skill. His natural form was now a 30-meter-long phoenix covered in black flames. But the skill turned him into a demon crow, only a little larger than his original windspeed hawk form, with a 2-meter wingspan. That would be incredibly useful inside of dungeons, or even just out in public. It also gave him so much more room in his Ghostfire tree to perch. Overall, 9 to 10 from him on this skill. It was just a shame it was a crow and not a hawk. Should we head out and wait for the Dana mage to finish her work? Carl asked the team. Ray was carefully inspecting the dungeon, and Kara was clearing the space of anything that resembled loot. But after Hawk had drained all the latent energy for his advancement, there wasn't much worth taking. Good to go, boss. Kara agreed, then returned to her space. The others followed, and Carl exited the dungeon, where a few dozen mythic adventurers were waiting for the results of the day. Well, I can't claim that I was the one to find it, but I might have been the first to complete it. This dungeon has a challenge mode. Single person or pairs. The dungeon is exactly the same as it was before, but the reward drops every 10 minutes. I got a bunch of random totem-ranked items and materials, heavily biased toward the unholy element, and 1 skill book which I have already used. Carl informed them. The nearest of the myths nodded. That's pretty good. Not easy, but getting a skill book as a reward is better than any piece of gear. Just the amount of money you can make by leasing the book to the Blue Dragons is totally worth it. There was a chorus of agreement from the crowd, and finally, someone asked what skill he got. The important part that everyone had forgotten about. It's an epic grade transformation skill into an unholy element beast. It appears to be random and assigned the first time that you use it because it's not specified within the spell description. Carl offered. A few of the warriors grumbled in discontent. That did them precisely 0 good. An epic grade physique was great, but having to fight as a beast? What were they, druids? That wasn't the sort of skill that they wanted at all. So, the value would be limited, but it was still an epic grade skill. I wonder if the other pair is doing all right? One of the spectators pondered. They're a few minutes behind, but they'll be out soon. I can see that, at the very least, my guild member is fine. Carl replied. But if you go in alone, you should be able to challenge the whole dungeon, right? Someone in the back row asked. That's right. Who wants to give it a shot? Carl asked. Dave stepped up to the front row with a smile on his face, and Carl chuckled. You got golems, right? Or an equivalent of them? He asked. Dave nodded. That's right. I got spirit guardians similar to the ones that Nilla has. With the 3 of us, it might be tough, but I've got some new gear, and being a druid, I have a lot of self-healing. Carl patted him on the shoulder and transferred Unholy Beast transformation to the druid, who winked at him, then paid the gate guards to enter the dungeon. See you all in a few minutes, he announced, then walked through the gate. That druid is insane, someone muttered. He's a tough sumbitch, though. If there are more people who can solo a dungeon boss, he's probably one of them. A burly warrior countered. In the dungeon, Dave immediately activated his new transformation to see what he would turn into. Unholy Beast transformation Underworld Primal Tiger. The tiger form was 2 meters tall at the shoulder, but close to 6 meters long. The raw power in his enhanced body was truly impressive, and Dave rumbled happily as he called for his spirit guardians. Rewards degrade every 10 minutes. Begin. Just after Dave entered, Dana came back out, looking exhausted. The white dragon was muttering to himself, but looking vaguely pleased. Are we the first out? He asked. The warrior closest to him shook his head, then gestured to Carl, who was tossing chunks of meat into the air for Hawk to catch. Dana stared at the scene for a second. It was utterly wrong, but somehow right. Wait, that's Hawk. When did he get small? She asked. New skill. You'll see his upgraded true form later. Carl explained. Good work, buddy. I knew that you'd find your way around the bottleneck sooner or later. She congratulated the happy bird. Hawk landed on her shoulder and danced back and forth for a moment, then took off again. It had seemed like a good idea, but Dana's shoulder wasn't as big as Carl's. What's with the bird? Is it like a ranger pet on steroids? One of the warriors asked. Actually, it's a dark flame phoenix, transformed so he doesn't get in trouble in public. Carl replied with a sly smirk. You're joking, right? Carl shook his head as Hawk swooped further into the sky and transformed, letting his body erupt into unholy flames and dense black miasma trail behind him. He flew in a loop to make a giant heart in the sky, and then transformed back into the demon crow so he could snag another bite of meat from Carl. Dana whistled in appreciation. Hawk really went all out with this transformation, but not pure fire? I'm surprised. Carl shrugged. He was a Ghostfire Thunderbird before, so it wasn't pure fire either. But it was the nature of the Fallen Seraphim dungeon during his advancement that helped him find this form. Advancing inside a dungeon is really the best choice for some beasts. Dana bumped against Carl's side. Are we ready to head back? Carl shook his head. Dave went in to challenge the dungeon. Dana frowned. That's probably a bad idea. The first boss needs a lot of damage to take out. Dave is tough, but he's not a high damage build. He might end up stuck at the first boss until he exhausts himself, and then it will be up to his instincts whether he can survive to the exit. Carl nodded. Well, it was his choice to enter, and I wasn't going to stop him. We will just have to see how he does. If you're in a hurry, I'm sure that we will find out later. Not so big of a hurry that we can't wait 30 minutes to see how Dave fares in a solo challenge. Especially since it's Dave. Are there any others in the dungeon now? She asked. Not that I know of, but there might be some regular teams inside. The gate guards shook their heads. Everyone was waiting for your group to come back out, so they could find out if there really was a hard mode. But none of us expected that it would be another challenge mode. Yeah, that's a bit of a tough one. But if you send one challenger and a healer who can do some damage, they can do the duo mode, and it isn't quite as insane as the challenge against Carnage. Carl suggested. Dana chuckled. While it was true that the fallen Seraphim were terrifying with their dark energy attacks and intimidation effect, Carnage was an absolute beast in single combat, and that was what she had deployed to deal with the bosses. So, is the Darklight Host a mercenary guild, then? One of the mythic warriors asked, seeing potential in the ability to hire rare specialty classes. Dana shook her head. We're a crafting guild, and we run a combat arena near the city center on the outskirts. We're better known for our crafted items than for our dungeon skills. But we have gotten lucky with a few and found hard modes embedded in them. Carl took off his bracelets and held them up so that the crowd could see that he had made them. They were both totem rank, epic grade items, and clearly informed anyone who inspected them that they were made by Carl. I can see why that is what people would remember about you. Those stats are drool-worthy. Do you sell them? The warrior asked. Carl shook his head. The good stuff doesn't go on the open market. The Immortal Regent asked us not to go too wild with the crafted items. But we make them for our Alliance members. A voice in the back laughed. That's just what he wants people to think he's best known for. The Monster Man is going to terrify some challengers during next year's dungeon duels. He's just hit mythic rank, and he's already one of the strongest duelists on the continent. That voice was familiar. Carl realized just a moment before Jerome stepped out of the crowd. Ah, Guild Leader Jerome. Good to see you again. Carl greeted him. No longer Guild Leader. The guild stripped my position after our duel. A few of the other warriors stared at him in shock. Wait, you're saying that this man, the craftsman, is the one who defeated you in an above-rank duel? A voice in the back asked. That's right. The Monster Man lives up to his name. I hear that he also defeated Carnage in a solo duel against the dungeon boss, and you just saw him complete a single challenge of the entire Fallen Seraphim dungeon. I heard a rumor that the reason we can't challenge for multiple mythic dungeons next year is because he reached mythic rank, and the mayor was afraid that he would simply take every dungeon that was within walking distance of his Alliance house. Jerome agreed. Carl considered pointing out that the decision was made by the Immortal Regent, but that likely wouldn't help his case. Some of these guys would not be happy about the no second chances policy. Many suspected that Jerome's words had more than a bit of truth. Anyone who could duel Carnage would be a real threat to the dungeon challenges. However, faced with such a large crowd, and the chance that they might not win the challenge if they did want to do anything to Carl, nobody was going to air such grievances today. It was a little over half an hour before Dave came back out again, covered in sweat and still healing, but looking pleased with himself. 2 epic items in a single run. Good ones too, he declared. Nobody but Carl and Dana were from his Alliance, so they wouldn't ask him about the details. Just knowing what sort of loot you could get was enough. 2 mythic rank epic grade items in a single day was enough that anyone who could do it would consider doing this dungeon alone at least once a week. But what they didn't realize was that Dave had an epic grade immortal rank weapon, and ever since Carl arrived, he had been swapping out his equipment to maximize damage, as he had limited invulnerability. He might be a tank specialized build, but his actual equipment was pure damage. Even then, he had struggled to do enough damage to the bosses that he could get them down in a reasonable amount of time. For an average 5-person group, this was a 15-minute run. It had taken him 3 times that. The fact he managed it was impressive, but it still meant that his damage output was only twice the average mythic damage dealer's, even with all his gear. He was going to need to find a few more specialty skills to bump up his damage so that he could keep doing these challenges. Relying entirely on gear wasn't going to do it, and he had gotten a few excellent skills from Carl now. But that still wasn't enough. However, he did owe a rather large favor for the epic grade tiger transformation. Those claws really tore the fallen Seraphim up. Now that you are back out of the dungeon, why don't we head to the Darklight Lounge at the arena for dinner? My treat. Carl offered Dave with a congratulatory pat on the back. Is that a fancy new place? One of the myths who had been waiting for them at the dungeon asked. Indeed it is. You should come along and check it out. We've got cooks on staff with Mystic Cooking as a trade skill, and the food is supposed to be excellent. I haven't had a chance to sample tonight's special, but there is no way it will be bad. Carl agreed. Fortunately for Carl, the staff at the arena were all linked to him by the artifact, and knew the moment that he invited a whole group to the restaurant. The place was packed, but there was the option for a private room to be opened at the side for VIP guests. Carl might have only recently met most of these people, but it was the only spot that they were going to get without waiting, so the priestesses prepared the private room for them. Hawk transformed when they walked through the portal and took a perch on Carl's shoulder. That was much better than Dana's, as he actually fit. If you wanted food, you just had to ask. You didn't have to come out to beg. Carl reminded him. I need snacks, Hawk insisted, and Carl realized that he could understand the demon crow's speech, as could everyone else. Did the crow just speak? One of the mythic warriors asked, following behind Carl as they approached the arena. Indeed, that's a new one for him, but the crow form is a transformation spell. That's actually a dark flame phoenix. Carl corrected him. Ah, that explains it. Phoenixes are smart, and demon crows can all speak at least a little bit. Somewhat like parrots, they can express dozens of words, all in demon tongues. But if he's actually a phoenix, his intelligence shouldn't be lacking. The warrior realized. It didn't cure his shamelessness, though. He's still out here on my shoulder to beg for food, when I could have just ordered for him. Carl joked. Carl led the way in the door, while Dana stayed back a few steps so that she could get a better view of everyone's reaction. This is impossible. Wow, the decor. How did anyone manage to build this? One of the guests asked. Dave smirked at Dana. Just wait until they realize that the restaurant is nearly as large as the actual main floor. But there were other shops and an arena entrance on this side. From the outside, the arena was impressive, but for people who were used to the best of the best, that wasn't enough to truly impress them. However, this restaurant that was decorated with what looked like a lifetime worth of wealth was an instant mind-breaker. Out of respect for the other diners, most of whom looked just as shocked and enthralled by their surroundings, the myths remained quiet until they were in the private room and seated. Then the questions began. Is there some major powerhouse backing this restaurant? I swear those were mythic rank holy stones used as lights in the chandelier. One of the men asked. They are, but they're not real. The decor is done with an illusion. So, even if the guild runs into the strongest of enemies, we don't have to worry about vandalism and theft costing us a fortune. We can just repair and replace the damaged interior items with a spell. Carl explained. Then the hostess, is that an illusion as well? Carl chuckled. Unfortunately, no. That is a very real high priestess of the spider goddess. There are a number of them working here. They like the ambience. That left the myths completely baffled. There wasn't anything that you could offer a spider priestess that would make them willingly serve others. But there was more than one in this restaurant. Could it be that they were the ones who bankrolled it? If this were their place, it would make sense that they were here to supervise. Is this an elven restaurant, then? One of the others asked. Carl chuckled. Not at all, though the dark elves do eat meat. The chef is not an elf at all, and the specials of the day might surprise you. I asked them to bring us a bit of everything, served family style. The food was out only moments later, and the guests stared at it in awe. Now, this is business advertising. I haven't even seen the arena floor yet, and I'm excited about it. One of the women joked. Dana chuckled. Well, the arena isn't for us. It's a mythic-ranked artifact, but that means it's meant for totem-ranked and lower fighters. It can make mythic opponents and barriers, but someone will have to reinforce them during the fight so that they aren't damaged by the backlash. The woman just shrugged. Some of us prefer to watch the fights and not start them. Totem-ranked arenas are quite the spectacle. Tell me, does your alliance form the majority of the performers? Dana shook her head. You misunderstand. The arena is designed so that you can pick from a variety of monsters, golems, and even dungeon bosses. It's not a staged show. It's an open combat and training arena. That was almost enough to make them stop eating. Almost. But not everyone was so eager to leave. Hawk had found himself a perch on the back of a chair, and the staff had brought him a plate, with everything portioned to be bite-sized for his demon crow transformation. It was like being back in his awakened rank glory days, where he could just show up in the cafeteria and people would feed him. Being small was definitely better at mealtime. What is this skill called? Is it something that can be learned? One of the warriors asked. It is mystic cooking, and it can definitely be learned. But we don't have a school to teach it, so finding a mentor will not be easy. Nearly everyone with the skill is already employed by the Nara Group Alliance as a chef. Carl explained. That raised more questions than it answered. Like, how did they find out about it? How did they find the people who had it? And most importantly, how could they poach one of the chefs? Once the dinner was finished, the group split up, and Carl went back to the hotel so he could work on new items in peace and still watch the fights. Will you be joining me? He asked as Dana finished her meal. She shook her head. No, I'm going back to the guild house in Drod. I promised Sapphire a few more rare skills for her library, and then someone needs to check up on the people there. The crafters should be doing well, but we've also got the orphanage, which might need something that they're too shy to ask Davis for. We really do need to give him a raise as well. He's doing so much more than just being a floor manager for the shop these days. You've got a point. Since we got busy with everything else, he's been left with the management of the Drod Guild House, and that can't be easy when we've overrun him with blue dragons. Carl agreed. Dana smirked. I think that the blue dragons are the only part that is making it manageable. They hate to be disturbed with their work, so they keep everything organized. We are getting a lot more visitors there than we used to, though. Carl sighed. You have a point. I should be over there. I've got so many skills that need to go to the blue dragons as well. Sapphire won't forgive me if I keep skills from her. Plus, I can more efficiently help with her experiments. Follow me. Little One was not a skill that any of the others had been able to use, so they had to actually write out the skill books to teach them to the test subjects. The librarians didn't really mind the work, but if there was a more efficient way to spread knowledge, they would prefer that. And that was how Carl and Dana both ended up at the work tables in the Tavern of the Workshop area, being lectured about being absentee managers by a centuries-old blue dragon. Once you start a project, you need to see it through. You can't just be running off every few days to start on something new. Sapphire complained. We have quite a lot going on, though. There is the Warrior Project, the Dungeon Project, the regular funding raids, the materials raids, the arena, new gear for the teams, then the political meetings to build alliances for the Darklight host. Carl explained. That's exactly my point. Stop starting new things. Dana winked at him. You forgot that we also need to sort through caretakers from the Red Dragons to run the baby dragon orphanage. It's not going to be long before they start hatching, and there are still too many applicants. Sapphire waved off her concern. I've got that handled. The Blue Dragons will be sending a few teachers, the White is sending a dedicated medic, the Silver Dragons have assigned one magical researcher, and they will mediate the arguments between the Red Dragons over who gets to watch the hatchlings. Chaos! Kara cheered. Oh, that reminds me. I've got a new skill. I don't suppose that you have any Chaos Element-aligned volunteers? I've got a Chaos Dragon Constitution skill that is epic grade and might be quite popular if anyone can use it. There is also an Elemental Wrath Totem for the Shamans, Dark Flame, for the Unholy and Fire-aligned, which should be most Wrath Demons, and Unholy Beast Transformation at the epic grade. Carl added. Oh, is that all? Sapphire asked in a snide tone. No, but it should do for today. Sapphire sighed, then nodded. We have volunteers for most of your skills, but finding someone compatible with a Chaos-type constitution will not be easy. We could try with some of the Beastkin, but it might cause unintended evolutions and unpredictable results. You could give it to Badgers, Dana suggested. The old blue dragon gave her a look that suggested giving Badgers a stronger constitution was the very last thing that she would ever want to do. But Dana was right. The Badger-type Beastkin were the ones most likely to be able to use the skill. All right, I will arrange for someone compatible to learn your constitution skill. I also have a shaman here who can learn the totem form, and more than one suitable demon. In fact, Ashbringer should be in on his way to work. He usually stops to get a snack to go. Sapphire agreed. Dark flames might not be perfectly matched to the demonic Grandmaster Smith, but they were very, very close. They were also stronger than the demonic fire that he already used. But now that he thought about it, Carl realized that adding the elemental wrath totem to the workspace would likely give them bonuses while crafting elemental weapons as well. Technically, it only added damage to elemental attacks, but when you were crafting items that added elemental damage, having the effect active should transfer some portion to the item that you were making. Ashbringer poked his head in the door, having heard his name. "Someone was calling for me?" he asked. "Perfect timing. The Carl is going to teach you a skill," Sapphire explained. Ashbringer simply walked over and waited, not surprised by much of anything that Carl might come up with at this point. Even if they told him that Carl had grown wings and learned to fly faster than a dragon, the demon would just nod and accept it as part of the abnormality that was his guild leader. Champion Carl offers knowledge, skill, dark flame, will be transferred to the devoted blacksmith Ashbringer. The demon lit a black flame over his hand that seemed to suck the light out of the room, and then snuffed it with a smile. "Oh, that is absolutely perfect for wrath demons. Fire and unholy element combined will make the most wonderful weapons for demons. All I will need to do is attune the bonuses and materials to the type of fighter that they are, and send it off to the runecrafters." Carl chuckled and the smith shrugged. "Do you have any idea how much time it saves me having them here? Instead of spending days beating the bonuses I want into the weapon, I can just have them draw all over it and call it a day." Wendy, the teen Oni demon from the runecrafting team, came over with a hug for Dana, who spun her in circles, laughing. "You know, we should get a gift for you too. I know how you love new spells. Now, what sort of spell do you need?" Dana teased the diminutive demoness. "I want the flames too. I'm a demon, a real demon. There is no reason that I can't have a cool new fireball." Carl shrugged and activated the skill again. Champion Carl offers knowledge, skill, dark flame, will be transferred to the inquisitive sorceress Wendy. Wendy's expression went blank, and Carl realized that she had been sent into the class change interface. She was only a royal rank mage and recently advanced, but it appeared that the new spell was enough to grant her a new class choice. Sapphire watched carefully with her notepad at the ready. It might not be part of her planned experiments, but it was a skill-triggered advancement, and it needed to be documented for their reports. If Dark Flame, a spell that a huge number of demons would be compatible with, was an advanced class trigger, it needed to be prioritized right behind the golem spells. The sound of crashing behind him distracted Carl just in time to catch Mage Jones, who had sensed the change in his daughter and came running through a portal too fast to stop. "Oop, there you go. Relax, she just got a new spell and it activated the class change menu. There is no danger to Wendy," Carl explained as he caught the Oni demon, who looked very human with his magical wig on. The mage shook his head. "I think that it changed something. I can sense the imbalance in her power, turning away from pure arcane magic." Carl frowned. The new spell she requested is a form of unholy fire. It's very suitable for demons of all sorts, but more to the wrath demons than most others, as they're already so fire-friendly. Wendy's dad nodded. "Then it shouldn't be harmful, I assume. But Oni demons aren't innately unholy aligned. We're a form of magic demon, so we're arcane aligned. However, Wendy spends too much time with the Blue Dragons and Hugo, that guild master from Xylaz. They've all been teaching her random new spells every week, and I can't keep up with it anymore." Dana laughed and gave him a consoling pat on the back. "Your little girl is growing up. But Wendy has an insatiable lust for knowledge that the dragons can't resist helping her with, and Hugo just wants someone to nerd out about spell theory with." The mage chuckled at Dana's description. That did sound an awful lot like his Wendy. She was incredibly good at making friends when she got a chance to, but if you gave her a chance to discuss magic, she wouldn't stop. Slowly, Wendy's eyes fluttered open, and Carl realized that she was finished with the screen, but immersed in her new skill options and spending any saved skill points that she had. She had runecrafting as a trade skill, and making items could give her skill points, he knew. So, she might actually have quite a few of them saved with how hard she worked to show off her skills. "Well, what did you decide on?" Carl asked once the young mage was finally finished with all her advancement-related decisions. Well, it gave me a whole bunch of class options, but most of them are basic mage-related ones. Now that is fun, and I love new spells. But they were kind of similar to the spells I already know, you know? So, I decided on one that was a little different. The class is called Demonic Array Master, and it lets me use my runecrafting to write spells in the air with dark flames to create spell circles. Big flashy spells with long-lasting effects, like making magical items, but without the item. Wendy was clearly proud of her class choice as she took out a wand and wrote out a defensive ward in the air, surrounding herself with a black barrier. See? It's even stronger than my usual barriers because I know so much about runes, and I can just write out the effect I want, she declared. Her father nodded. They're a bit slow but very impressive. At the royal rank, there shouldn't be many that can overcome your array. Of course, she didn't have to stay at the royal rank forever. Remy had potions that would help her advance once she was closer to the bottleneck. But she had already used one to get past commander rank, and she was still a growing girl. Even Remy didn't want to risk messing up her progress too much. It might make her grow too fast and stop being small and adorable. That was not the part that her father was concerned about. Now that his research-obsessed daughter could just write arrays in the air, wouldn't that encourage her to spend more time wandering off with that oversized mage instead of coming home for family dinners? She was supposed to be living 2 minutes from his house, where she could come home for visits whenever he wanted, not on the other side of a portal and halfway across a continent with a mythic mage backing her up. How was he supposed to compete with that? Though Carl didn't truly understand the man's dilemma, he could clearly see the concern in Mage Jones' face. Why don't you invite Hugo over one day? He's quite friendly, and I'm sure that he'd love to meet his new friend's family, Carl suggested. Wendy clapped her hands excitedly. Oh, we can show him the new dishes that we have found. There are so many options now that we have mythic cooks in the kitchen, and not everyone likes the same stuff that the demons and dwarves do, so he might not have tried it yet. That sounded like a dangerous proposal to Carl, who knew what sort of dishes the kitchen had cooked up when left unsupervised. Or worse, when supervised by Lotus. The spectacle had gathered a number of the off-duty workers from the cavern, and everyone wanted the chance to congratulate Wendy on her advancement. Fortunately for Carl, that also brought over all the people that he needed to talk to on this visit. Davis, don't run away. I have good news for you, Carl called when he caught sight of the overworked fallen seraphim. Davis gave him a suspicious stare. When you say that there are good things coming for me, it always means more employees, more guild members, and more work, even though the shop now does 5 times as much business through the Alliance store as it does through the main shop. If it wasn't for the restricted level of most of our crafters, we would be selling even more, and the Alliance is still talking about expanding further. Carl felt a sense of embarrassment for the extra work that he had piled on Davis, who was only supposed to be the store manager. Technically, the Alliance purchases were still part of the store, but his duties had gone far beyond what he had signed on for. I'm not going to make more work for you this time. Instead, I've come to give you a raise. You've been doing far too much work for your pay grade, and you've led the guild store to fame and profits far greater than expected. The craftsmen all earn on commission, a portion of the sale price of their items. But you have been on salary, based on the cost of living here in Drod. If you were employed in Xylaz, your pay would be significantly higher, as are the prices for the goods that you manage. So, we will be adjusting your pay commensurately, Carl declared. I'm more shocked that he knew the word commensurately and used it somewhat properly. Sapphire muttered to herself, which made Dana giggle. Davis, who had not heard the dragon's snide remark, simply smiled and bowed to Carl. Thank you for your consideration. Should I prepare the budget numbers for a new pay package? He asked. Carl shook his head. No, I will declare the raise now, and then you can work out the numbers along with next pay period's sales. Davis smiled at the answer. It was basically a not my problem from Carl, but Davis knew that there was far more revenue than would ever be declared in a pay package. Even if he earned 10 times what any of the Smiths did, it still wouldn't put a dent in the guild's monthly profits. Carl had the system upgrade the pay package of Davis's work contract, which could be done without signing a new form, as it was a pay raise, and the system had no problem letting the guild branch leader hand those out. Docked pay or a lower pay package the member would have to sign their agreement to but not pay raises. They're all done. If you're using the automatic transfer between the guild house balance and the guild members, it should go automatically to you. Carl informed the overjoyed demon. Indeed, and it will be enough to make my mother proud of me for once. Davis joked. Wendy laughed. What do you mean, for once? That old woman doesn't do anything but brag about you all day long. I don't think that I've ever seen a parent quite as proud of her child as she is of you. Carl noticed a red dragon cleric passing by and waved her over. You are new. Were you here for the orphanage? He asked. I am one of the new arrivals, preparing for the dragons that the guild apparently has ready to hatch. Birdie is my name in the human tongue. We started to gather a few days ago, and you must be Carl, the guild branch leader. She replied. Wonderful to meet you, Birdie. The eggs still have a bit of time, but having everyone in place first would be best. I will need to gather everyone who is going to be moving to the separate space so that I can confirm that they understand the nature of the assignment. The eggs can't safely be moved for some time, but the separate space they are in is linked to me, so it may change locations, and the entrance might not always be accessible. So you will need to work with the druids and nature clerics to ensure that you are producing everything that you need. Carl explained. Birdie nodded. I hear that there is enough room there to fly freely, and that you have created a biome for each type of dragon egg. That is wonderful news, and much better than the average orphanage. Sapphire smiled indulgently at the young red dragon. There is more than enough room to fly. It is a tiny world spell, not just a hidden space. Carl, how large is it now? Carl shrugged. I have been expanding it since I reached mythic rank, and while I didn't bring it to maximum size, it's hundreds of kilometers across now. Enough that there is not only room to fly, but it has become nearly necessary to fly to get around efficiently. The nature clerics have broken themselves into groups so that they don't have to travel so far every day. But we have added teleportation platforms in the space that let you get to major landmarks easily. Dana frowned at Carl. When had he done that? About 5 seconds after he said that he had. That is when he added them, with one marked platform a few hundred meters from each of the camp locations, and then one near the mock guild house and the underground city. The tiny world was feeling much more complete now that Carl was getting ahead on his understanding of the mana manipulation fundamental rule. It wasn't at the point that it could be considered a fully independent space yet. But it was getting close, and Carl could use it as a test to measure how his progress toward immortality was coming. Though at this rate, both Kara and Hawk might beat him to full understanding of a rule. Birdie silently called over the rest of the orphanage workers, including the matron Blackclaw from the orphanage at the Drod Guild House. She wouldn't be leaving, as her charges were going to be productive citizens of Drod once they grew up. However, that didn't mean that she would accept being left out of the loop when there were big things happening to her fellow clerics. Well, that was quick. Do we have everyone gathered? I see dragons from at least half the aspects here. Carl began. We have all the important ones for an isolated orphanage and dragon temple here. Red, blue, white, silver, bronze, green. Matron Blackclaw agreed, speaking as the ranking priestess present. An orphanage counted the same as a temple, library, or academy. The one who led it had the highest position in the hierarchy of dragon clerics. Well, now that is surprising, but it should work out well for us, as we've got dragons of every sort waiting to hatch. Have you all been briefed on how they came to be where they are? Carl asked. Matron Blackclaw nodded. Everyone has the details, and it has been accepted that these eggs are all orphaned, even if their actual parents might be alive on another world, or roaming wild on another continent. They were abandoned and not handed over to the church in a proper manner, so we will raise them all equally, without any intentions of giving them back to their parents at adulthood. Dana smirked, and the red dragon winked at her. Go ahead and ask. The one known as Lotus has been begging us to allow her to raise one as a new best friend for weeks. The matron informed her. That was actually what I was thinking. I overheard Lotus and Button plotting ways to get a baby dragon to play with. Dana laughed. The matron sighed. Right, I almost forgot about the forest dragon. While she's not technically an orphan, and she's being raised by the nature clerics, She will be among the first that enter the educational system. The Blue Dragon adherents will lose their minds to see her running wild without any form of educational plan. It would take some devoted efforts to find her and keep her in one spot all day. But Dana assumed that they had a plan for that, which would be suitable for a forest dragon who already knew the basics about plants and who had a job to do. If you could count gathering chicken eggs while resisting the urge to stop and eat them as a job. Not that Button would do any such thing. The chickens would attack her if she did. Since everyone already knows what is going on, I thought that I could introduce you to the tiny world today. It will take some stress off poor Davis here, and it will give you all time to get situated before the hatchlings arrive. Carl began. Immediate excitement spread through the crowd. This was what they had been waiting for, their new assignment, or for many of them, their first assignment. The church had decided to send only a few senior dragons to the tiny world, as they knew that the mana there would be incredibly dense, and that would benefit young dragons who were still growing into maturity much more than it would the older ones. The primary goal was to help the young ones grow into proper adults, but helping the young adults grow into powerful elders of the church was also an important goal. Their only major concern was that the red and blue dragons who worked in school and orphanage duties were overwhelmingly the women, while the men mostly volunteered for either combat duties or library research positions. So, they had tried to balance them out with a few men from the silver and bronze dragons, but ultimately, they had only found 4 men in total out of the 20 who were going to raise the dragons. Is it just me? Or are there a lot more dragons than I was expecting? Dana asked, doing a quick head count. 20 in total. Hatchling dragons are a terror, far worse than you might have experienced before. Especially when they're from mixed species and all want to show off and argue about whose innate powers are best. Matron Blackclaw insisted. Hawk, who had chosen to circle overhead, chirped a laugh, and the dragon looked up at him. Fire. It's obviously fire. He insisted. The red dragon laughed. See, that is exactly what I'm talking about. Then she tossed a chunk of dried meat up to him, and Hawk cheered as he retreated to a rafter to enjoy his snack. You know, the Beast Masterclass might actually be very suitable as an option for red dragons. You're a natural. Carl commended her. I've had over a century of experience. If I couldn't guess what keeps young ones under control, who could? She retorted. But as I was saying, the church has chosen these 20 for your brood. These 2 fine young men are Rashid and Oben, the assigned arbiters from the bronze dragon god. That is Raced. He will be representing the silver dragon of magic. And then we have Axel, the patron of the orphanage, who will be working with his wife Alia. Matron Blackclaw explained. Carl didn't miss that the matron didn't introduce all the ladies to him, though many of them were standing closer than the bronze dragons, who had chosen to watch from the back. Whether that was because she didn't trust him getting too friendly with them, or out of consideration for his status as a married man, he didn't know. Could be both. Well, if the kids are off at work already, you can accompany us to the tiny world for a tour, Carl offered. Matron Blackclaw shook her head. No, let the new matron and her partner lead this group from the start. They don't need me looking over their shoulder. Carl nodded and opened a portal into the tiny world. Dana, if you could lead them through, we will start at the lake so that they can meet with some of the other residents. He offered. They didn't have to wait that long, as Button came flying out of the portal in dragon form to crash into Dana, then spin her in circles by flapping while holding her shirt. Here we have Button. Our resident foodie forest dragon helps with egg collecting, and likes long swims in the lake, or naps on the black stone of the mountains. Carl joked. Button nodded happily. Yes, those were both good things, but it was breakfast time now. We need to go. It's shakshuka day. She insisted. All right, let's go. Here, have this until we get there. Dana replied. She wrapped an arm under the dragon and carried the meter-long, 30-kilo reptile like a baby as she fed Button a pancake. Matron Elia, the new matron for the tiny world's dragons, chuckled at Dana's attempts to calm the forest dragon. It was doomed to fail in about 5 seconds, as you couldn't turn a forest dragon upside down without confusing their sense of direction. At least not the young ones. Sure enough, a few seconds later, Button was leaping out of Dana's arms to fly around her head. Then she noticed Hawk, who was in demon crow form, and realized that there were other flying creatures her size. Maybe she could keep up with this one. Everyone else was too big and fast or didn't have wings. She was doomed to disappointment, as even in this reduced form, Hawk still had the speed that he always had, and that had only increased with his advancement to the mythic rank and his evolution into a dark flame phoenix. As with most forms of phoenix, he was incredibly adept in the air and could fly close to the speed of sound. There was no way that the young forest dragon could keep up. But on the other hand, Hawk despised putting that much effort into anything that didn't end with food, so he was much more comfortable flying at her speed than anyone else. So, not a total loss. Hawk followed her into the portal, as he had heard the magic words, "Food is ready. There had better be meat." The elves were bad about making enough meat. The rest of the dragons followed Dana and the two flying miscreants through the portal, then paused as they heard the cook cussing at Button. "Did you deliberately bring me dozens more people to cook for? You know that you're supposed to warn me." She was grumbling. "Miss, don't be too mad at the little one. We have already eaten." She was just excited to bring her Dana mage and the bird to see you, Patron Axel replied. "And she brought men into the space? Now I'm going to have to get dressed in the morning," the elf added. The dragon laughed, the glow from his red eyes flickering with amusement. "If it helps, I spend almost all my time in dragon form, so pants are definitely optional." The other men shrugged, and Rashid smiled. The bronze dragon isn't a prude. If the rules say no clothes needed, then there are no clothes needed. The druid on cooking duty gave him a long look over. "I think that this might work out just fine." The bronze dragon gave her a cautious smile. "I'm not sure that we're thinking of the same set of duties for this deployment." She just shrugged. "You're a bit young, but I can add it to the regulations if it makes you feel better." That made Rashid smile. He was 300 years old, but given her middle-aged appearance, the elf should be closer to 700. Maturity-wise, they should be close, but she was definitely more aggressive about relationships, when he had always focused his energies on legal analysis. Button frowned. "Sister Kara says that if you want to find out what someone tastes like, you should just lick them." That brought the flirting to a screeching halt. "Pardon?" the incredulous bronze dragon asked. "Auntie looks like she would like to eat you, but you're not allowed to eat people. I asked the badger big sister, and she said that it's all right to just test them if you don't use teeth." Button explained simply. The cook winked at him. "You hear that? It's fine, just a taste." Rashid cleared his throat and made a mental note to look into the creative interpretations of legal precedent that the Chaos Badger might have been teaching the young dragon. Letting her babysit was a mistake, but he suspected that it was actually impossible to stop her. The badger and forest dragon were the same size, and they could escape through spaces too small for others to follow them without a transformation spell or teleportation. Birdie, one of the youngest of the red dragons present, giggled. "I am getting visions of random people being licked by a forest dragon." The cook shook her head. "That was 2 weeks ago. She knows what all the species taste like now." Axel, the new patron assigned to the tiny world, turned to Carl. "We really do need to have a talk about the parenting methods of the Darklight host. Did you at least assign a responsible adult to her care?" "Well, there are all the ones in here. But," Carl began. "But Ophelia the Werbear is the closest thing to a responsible adult caretaker that we have in the guild, if you don't count red dragon priestesses." Dana finished. Carl mentally checked the space, and found that Tessa and Thor were not here today. Nor were any of the other ladies, so it must be a dungeon run day. Thor liked to wait outside for them to exit the Overlord rank dungeon. Axel nodded. "We were informed that there was an Overlord-ranked High Priestess here in the Darklight host. If it weren't for the unique circumstances, she would have likely been nominated for the role of matron. However, with so many dragon eggs, it was deemed to be appropriate to send actual dragons for the job, so she wouldn't get bullied." The thought made Dana laugh quietly. Bullying Tessa was not easy. "I have made you a map of the space so that you know where the major landmarks are, and where the eggs are incubating. However, these lovely ladies are the caretakers of the space, and in charge of the alchemy ingredient fields. All the fields, actually, but most of what we grow is alchemy ingredients. Carl explained. Is there formal housing? Or should we construct something? Axel asked. We have a replica of the Drod Guild house here, and that will work for a base of operations, but there is also a small city built inside the mountain. That is much larger and suitable for an orphanage facility, as it has dragon-sized entrances on the upper levels. I don't know how all the species react to being underground, though. Carl explained. What was your plan if the church didn't send people? The red dragon asked curiously. To have Tessa gather them for meals and lessons, then to let them just do dragon things for the rest of the day. It's worked out all right for Button, and she's becoming a responsible member of society. Carl's explanation fell flat when everyone turned to see that the little dragon had not transformed to use cutlery, and was face deep in a bowl full of breakfast. Bad example, but you get my point. Lyric laughed, and Button shrugged. She intended to keep playing in the water and didn't want to put on her dress until she was dry again. Why don't we go look at the housing situation, and then we can decide if we need to make more, or if it is sufficient? Axel asked. Carl took a bowl of breakfast and nodded in agreement. First, take a moment to get to know the locals. Then we will head over. It's a bit of a walk or we can fly. Is everyone in the group a dragon? Or do we have dragonkin? All dragons in this group. Your guild already had dragonkin, I believe. Or humans that were becoming dragonkin as they gained favor of their gods. Which is really the same thing from our point of view. Axel agreed. Wonderful. Then we can fly instead of taking the portals, Carl announced. The dragons immediately got excited. And even Button hurried to finish her food and run into the lake to wash herself clean in anticipation of a morning flight. If Carl was here, then Kara was here, and she would fly at an appropriate speed. Hawk too. Hawk thought that he might really enjoy flying with her, and not just because she stopped every 15 minutes to beg for snacks. Carl finished the surprisingly tasty combination of eggs and tomatoes over potato, and handed his plate back to the cleanup staff. All right. Everyone ready to transform? Dana, you can hop on my back, or fly along with us, he suggested. Dana laughed at his suggestion. While she could fly fast enough to keep up with casual dragon flight, it was exhausting to do for long. They might be headed to the housing areas, but they certainly wouldn't go straight there. That was never how it worked. Carl transformed, and the other dragons stared at him for a moment. What sort of spell effect is that? I swear he's turned into an actual dragon, Birdie remarked. It's called Avatar. It gives me this wonderful world dragon form. I thought that it was only proper to go as a dragon since everyone else is. Carl joked. The young red dragon transformed, and then laughed when she realized that she was less than a third of Carl's size, despite being an overlord. Red dragons were among the larger of the chromatic dragons, but Carl's avatar form was naturally oversized, even for a mythic rank dragon, though he wasn't using any skills to increase it. Dana leapt up onto his back, and Carl locked her in place with eternal lightning, so that they could fly freely without any need to hold on. Then, the rest of the dragons transformed and Kara came out to join her partner in pranks for an outing. Now that everyone was going to be distracted by the inspection of the tiny world, it was a perfect opportunity for them to explore as well. As they flew away, one of the dragons discreetly cast a tracking spell on them, so she could find them later, a sensible measure to keep track of the most likely troublemakers within the tiny world. Unfortunately for her, the moment that she turned away, Kara also discreetly dispelled the effect so that she could sneak off with Button to play in the mountains. The dragon sighed dramatically as she realized what had happened the moment the spell vanished, but didn't try to chase them down. This was a restricted space and they would come back when they got hungry. Or bored. The first thing we should do is the grand tour. If you follow me, we will cross the lake, and then view the grassland region, which is mostly open with some alchemy crops in it. Carl began as he led a casual procession through the sky. Some alchemy crops was a massive understatement at this point, as almost the entire region was full of low-grade magical plants. But they formed the basis for the most common healing potions that the shop sold, so they needed a lot. Not the hundreds of acres that they had, but perhaps one day in the distant future they would have enough alchemists to make that many. Then we have the tropical forest, where you will find more alchemy ingredients, as well as a number of clusters of dragon eggs that were aligned to the nature element. Down there on your right, you will see some of our workers checking on them now. Carl continued while he waved down at the druids. They waved back, pretending that they weren't confused by the group of 20 dragons that had suddenly appeared above their territory. Next is the swampland. This is one of our busiest regions, as there are so many rare ingredients that love the hot and humid atmosphere. There are also many dragon eggs along the shore here, next to that camp. Finally, we have the food crops, the training areas, and the guild house before we reach the mountains. Near the top of that flat peak is the entrance to the underground city, with more dragon eggs, and behind the ridge is a collection of hot springs for relaxation. I will let you tour a while on your own, and then we can explore the underground city. Carl finished. Is the delay so that you can find the forest dragon and undo whatever she got up to with the badger? One of the red dragons asked. No, we will find them soon enough. It's just so that everyone can pick the place where they feel most comfortable, free from my pressure. Carl explained. That was perfect. They could pick their own spots, and the blue dragons could argue about what would be the best place to put the school, given the options of terrain and existing structures. They might also opt to build a whole new school here, but that was up to them. And argue is what they did. The red dragons went straight to the replica guild house to see if it was suitable as their base of operations, the residence for the instructors and guardians. The blue dragons circled near the top of the airspace so they could see all of the options as they argued about the choices, and the silver dragon went straight for the training ground to inspect the spells that Carl had put in to make training targets and smashing poles. To him, that was much more interesting than small things like where he would sleep or where they would be teaching dragons that hadn't even hatched yet. The magic was right here and it was active. The rest could be sorted out when it was actually important, like tomorrow when he got tired. Carl circled with Dana for a few more minutes, then decided to land at the guild house replica, where it appeared that the majority of the red dragons had agreed to move. There was plenty of room, technically. The only issue that might occur was that the rooms were designed as soldiers' dorms and then converted to worker spaces. So, there were only a few nice rooms up top, and then dozens of small ones on the second floor with communal showers and facilities. Ladies, good day. I know that this might not be the perfect housing, as it is already partially in use. Carl began. Oh, that's fine. From what we can tell, it's only the second floor that has units in use, and there are extras for the patron and matron. The rest of us are all single, and it's normal for orphanage matrons to live simple lives. Well, relatively simple. There is a lot of magic in this place already. Bertie explained. Oben, one of the two bronze dragons, chuckled. That is true, everything is covered in runes. But these rooms are far nicer than the dorms at any dragon temple. I believe that the Golden Dragon Nation keeps to the penitent cells model for church rooms. Do they not? Carl frowned. With the single bed and dresser in a stone room with a slit window? The dragon nodded. That's the one. We all lived in them for most of our young lives. I think that the only ones who didn't were Raced and one of the blue dragons, who grew up in libraries instead of orphanages. Neither of them are clerics, just dragons representing their aspects. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. For some reason, I thought that with all the wealth of the Dragon Isles, that the standards in the churches would lean toward luxury. Carl realized. Oben shook his head. No, that would upset the gods. Any other dragon can gather their own hoard and live in luxury. But we're clerics. We promise to devote our lives to our gods and goddesses. Dana smiled at the bronze dragon. That makes perfect sense. Too much luxury just leads to distractions from your work. I'm sure that once the hatchlings come, you will have more than enough work to keep you busy without going looking for distractions. Oben winked at her. We're also here to keep notes on the shenanigans that the Friends of the Chaos Dragon get up to. Most of the world might not be aware, but the Bronze Dragons know all about the rich history of the Darklight host. Dana laughed. And not just because you have at least one brother in the guild. I will admit that Orthos has been a great source of information, especially since his branch of the guild came back online not long ago. Oh, I wasn't supposed to tell Carl about that. Dana smirked at the embarrassed dragon and patted him on the shoulder. Relax. I'm at least 70% sure that Carl won't show up at his temple looking to steal one of his guild members as a partner. Oben looked at Carl, then back at Dana. 70% might be optimistic, but I will accept that analysis. After all, they might be from the Divine Beast Nation, but they are still guild members. Carl sighed dramatically. O ye of little faith! There is no need for me to go steal his guild members when there is an entire nation full of possibly divine beasts there. If we needed another sibling for the group, I'm sure that I could find a suitable candidate without poaching from my old friend. You've known Orthos for some time, then? I wasn't aware you had met. Oben asked. Oh, get him to tell you the story sometime. I actually met him during the last resurgence, in the city of Bunga. He's taken over the position of city lord again now that the system came back online there, so he should be easy to find. Carl suggested. Oben nodded. Once the restrictions on the continent lift a little more, we will send more people. There are still issues with wild dragons and off-world attackers. It will need to be sorted out eventually, but with the limits from the slowly fading curse, the church has decided to wait before they send a large force in and risk causing a revolution. Then the bronze dragon paused. I suspect that I wasn't supposed to tell Carl that either. You have an entire list of taboo topics that you didn't have time to memorize, don't you? Dana asked. The dragon nodded. It only arrived yesterday. I hadn't gotten an opportunity to read it before you suddenly arrived. I suspect that it's mostly on the theme of don't encourage ideas that will make the Chaos Dragon start trouble out of boredom. Or something similar. Dana smiled. That is a good general idea, but hardly needs a letter to remind everyone. However, it's not just Carl you need to be careful of. He can hear all the beast's thoughts, and they have just as many troublesome ideas as he does. The only one who didn't was Opal. No, Dana corrected herself. This butterfly would become a dirty movie producer with a passion for exhibitionism if no one stopped her. She was obsessed with spicy romance novels and other people's relationships. The red dragons started to explore the rooms, ensuring that the second-floor suites were all the same. There were some small differences based on where they were, but only the four-corner units were larger than the others. That let the red dragons choose quickly and write their names on their chosen doors. But they didn't get long to settle in before an emergency message from Kara interrupted them. One of the swamp dragon eggs is hatching. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our first arrival ready to appear. In the swamp section, we have an imminent hatching. Carl announced. That got all of the dragons running for the door. If the swamp dragon was allowed to hatch in the wild, it would take extra time to tame them again, and even longer to convince them that someone would be taking care of their needs in the future. If they didn't want a rampaging baby dragon attacking people and livestock for food, they needed to move quickly. Everyone transformed to fly over, just in case there were other eggs about to hatch that nobody had noticed yet, and a few of the red dragons broke off to go check on the regions that were out of sight, like the underground nest in the mountains. Carl mentally checked the tiny world and saw that it was just the one, but he decided not to mess with their system, in case his interference caused future issues. The egg isn't alone, is it? One of the dragons asked as they raced toward the swamp. Of course not. There is a caretaker there, an Orcish druid, plus Kara and Button, who you met earlier. Carl explained, using the draconic language while he was transformed. That was a good start. At the very least, it was unlikely to go feral if it hatched with a caretaker around. How it would react to meeting a random orc the moment that it woke up was a different issue. Ooh, I see an eye. It's almost out. Kara narrated as Carl approached. Dana hopped off his back, and Carl transformed back in midair, letting himself fly down to the ground level as the dragons landed all around them. Most transformed, but a few remained in the scaled forms. To Carl, it looked like an intimidation tactic, a silent way to encourage a newborn dragon to behave and not bite anyone. The single yellow eye was examining its surroundings through the crack in the egg, and then two small claws pulled more of the shell apart, and the whole head poked out. The swamp dragon's head looked a lot like a crocolisk, Carl thought. It was wider and longer than most dragons, with a double ridge of short spikes down the top of the snout. Carl smiled, and Patron Axel gave him a raised eyebrow curious look. I was just thinking of something that the church once told me. It turns out that they were wrong, but not in the way that they expected. Carl joked. Kara nodded eagerly. Nacht was wrong. We do have a baby dragon. The tiny creature, not much larger than Tion at less than 5 kilos, broke free of its containment and launched straight at Kara. It had its teeth bared, as if it had found prey, but the badger was not concerned. The tiny dragon crashed into her upraised paw, and then flailed helplessly as she blocked it by the nose. The scene was comical, with a tiny dragon helplessly trying to determine how to use its body, and one amused chaos badger letting it run in circles, trying to escape a paw that was simply blocking the front of its nose, not even holding it. After a few moments, Birdie took pity on the little dragon and stepped forward to pick it up. Calm down, little one. You can't eat her, she's too tough. Why don't you try this instead? She cooed, then began dropping small bits of meat into the swamp dragon's mouth. That calmed it down immediately, and the small creature quickly fell asleep once it was full. Hey, it sleeps like me. Button laughed as the dragon passed out in Birdie's arms with its head lolling to the side. Do we know when these eggs were all laid? Axel asked. Carl shook his head. No, the mothers were captured by dragon hunters, and they were raising them to attack locals. These eggs were the ones that were left behind when the camp was abandoned. The mothers either didn't want them, or were already dead by the time that we arrived. So, we need to keep a close eye on all of the locations until they do hatch. I will cast spells to determine their maturity later. However, we need to let the others know that our job has already started, and get them to pick all their training locations. Dragons aren't like most species. Training starts right away because he will be able to speak by tomorrow. Axel explained. Carl chuckled. If he wasn't so frustrated by Kara blocking his nose, he would be able to talk already. I met a newly hatched white dragon once, and it could speak a little right at hatching. The dragons laughed. I never thought about just putting a hand over their nose to keep them from charging. It's diabolical, but so effective against young dragons who haven't learned to strategize. Kara smirked, and Birdie gave her a suspicious look. That badger is planning ways to steal and corrupt the baby dragons. She insisted. Kara made a dramatic wounded gesture, standing on her hind legs to cross her paws over her heart. Yep, she's definitely scheming. However, steal might be overstated. I don't think that she wants to take them out of the tiny world, just recruit more troublemakers. Axel noted. That's the same thing, isn't it? If I have to search every tiny hiding space for a baby dragon who has had his tracking spell nullified, it might as well be stolen. Birdie complained. Kara laughed. The young red dragon had no sense of imagination. It was much funnier to leave the tracking spell intact, than play hide and seek. Carl was about to speak when the panicked messages from the Drod Branch Guild members began. We're under attack. The gargoyles will hold the yard. Who is on the spells? I'll push Mana to the barrier. Who knows where Sapphire went? I've got Sapphire. She was at the wharf market and it's under attack as well. We can't get back quickly. Call the Alliance. Aren't Carl and Dana in the tiny world? They should be able to come back. Oh, Ray is here. Focus on the barrier on the yard. Thor is here too. But no Tessa or the others. I think they're in a dungeon. There is an emergency in Drod. You all stay here, and I'm going to seal the tiny world when I leave. Carl explained hurriedly. Dana left with him, arriving in the Alliance house, and then taking the basement portal to Drada's guild house library. Carl left directly with a portal, then sealed the tiny world. The exit was in the Xylaz guild house, but it was safer to keep everything out until he knew what the threat was. Moments after he arrived, another portal opened in the yard of the guild house, and Deve led a large force of myths from the Alliance out. What is happening? Oh hell! He shouted, his voice turning to a stammer as he saw the situation. Hundreds of portals had opened all over the city, mostly in the air overhead. Supreme Lady Matilda was high overhead, engaged in combat with some sort of eldritch horror that looked like an octopus, and tens of thousands of mythic rank beasts had invaded the city. Thinking fast, Carl sent out a bounty to the Xylaz mission boards. Mythic rank beast invasion of Drod ongoing. Nara Group offering cash for edible beast corpses. Buying at wholesale plus 10% bounty. No purchase limit on beasts from the Drod area invasion. He paid extra to have it ping all the registered guild and alliance leadership members in the entire Xylaz region. It might cost them a fortune to buy up all the corpses, but Carl could sense mythic presences everywhere, plus the supreme rank octopus thing. The financial cost would not be the worst part, though. Those portals didn't lead somewhere else in the world. They led to somewhere much more powerful, most likely a world in the immortal realm. That wasn't something that they could easily compete with, and the Supreme Lady looked like she already had her hands full. "Where is Azov?" Dana asked as she sent her golems out to fight the amphibious monsters in the streets. "He's busy. This isn't the only portal that made it through today," someone shouted back. Dana turned and saw Lord Drod with a group of totem-ranked guards fighting in their direction. She charged out into the street, hacking her way through the frog-like beasts that were spitting balls of magical water at the guards. They didn't look too scary, but at mythic rank, they were quickly destroying the buildings along the street. The locals didn't have anywhere to flee, as there were attackers on every street. A second massive octopus creature appeared from a portal overhead, and Kara began to drool. Gigantic calamari. Hawk laughed. He knew that food was the true unifying force of the world. But more importantly, every single one of these invaders was a water element beast. He couldn't seem to muster that same level of rage he used to feel against water, but he certainly wasn't going to allow the water element to take over one of his homes. His dark flame phoenix form streaked through the sky, headed for the giant octopus with Kara right behind him, and Carl turned his attention to sending his golems out to reinforce the area around the guild house. They had the city wall on one side with Drod city guards all along it, but they were at least one rank and mostly two ranks beneath the invaders. Their attacks were minimally effective to say the least. "Captain, tell your men to focus on defense, and I will send golems out the gate to secure the area," he shouted at the demons standing in the observation post over the gate itself. "Got it. We are trying to evacuate the area, but we can't do it fast enough. Jones is fighting out there as well, but I don't know how long his house can hold," the captain shouted back. Jones was a totem-rank dragon, but just like the guards, he wasn't going to be able to hold for long. Carl focused his mana for a moment and grew a statue-sized mana crystal that he placed at the door to the workshop area. It wasn't linked to anything, but it was set to pull in mana as fast as possible so others could use it. Then, he added a mana pylon spell to keep the barriers and defenders full of energy. The range was enough to reach Lord Drod, who had joined forces with Dana's team, while Carl's had left the city walls. "This calamari is too tough," Kara complained. She hadn't expected it to be an immortal creature when she went to chop off some limbs to snack on. Just her and Hawk were not enough to defeat it. Then, more portals opened outside the guild house gate, where Carl's golems were fighting. Mythic-ranked warriors charged out in a wave of bodies, followed by a totem-ranked mage from Deve's guild. "Guild Master, what is the target?" he shouted. "Everything mythic-ranked and amphibious. It should all be edible enough to qualify. Send as many as you can find." "Devi Kojibek, I've got the portal open at the arena now." There was an announcement by the referees, and we've got more people coming once the spectators gather their teams. The mage explained. Devi's Milid. That arena was working out for them in more ways than one. They'd already gotten 100 mythic warriors and a few other classes, and the alert had only been out for 2 minutes. All of the mythic members of the Alliance arrived in the next minute, securing the guild house and the 3-block area around it. That gave the arrivals from the arena room to gather and stage, in case they didn't have a healer in their group. They hadn't come with a raiding team, they had come from the arena, and many of them were transients who joined other groups to fight, and simply wanted the bounty to keep their bills paid. That was fine by the Nara group. They would gladly take another 10 or 20 warriors per group and go out in large teams to clear entire blocks at a time with a single healer. Instead of fighting directly, as Dana was doing, Carl was using earth manipulation to make healing totem statues that Tion was passing out in exchange for an IOU token. The warriors were happy to accept the exchange, as they would just turn in corpses to cover the bill. Some certainly planned to run away without paying, but that would also mean that they didn't get paid for their work here, and there was a chance that the statues could be tracked. What most didn't realize was that their IOU token could also track them down. But the healing totem statues weren't personal, they were an area effect, and healed everything that was identified as an ally. As long as the warriors recognized that someone was not one of the invading monsters, the statues would heal them as well. So, when they spread through the city, it created a massive net of healing effects. The warriors, the wounded locals, even other teams, they were all pulsed with healing energy. Carl expected the amount of mana being used by the statues to cause some sort of imbalance in the city, but the open portals that the invaders had come through were emitting energy that was much more intense. Mana so thick that it was condensing on the windows of houses close to the portals was flooding Drod, and Carl could feel hundreds of people breaking through bottlenecks all over the Stone Chapel district and the Frostfire Gate region outside the walls. Not that it would help most of them during this fight, as they were breaking through the commander and royal ranked bottlenecks. But if they survived the day, it would be a large change in their social status. Overhead, a massive distortion was forming around the battle between Matilda and the octopus. It looked like they were both trying to pull the other into another realm, but the effects were countering each other. It felt like the world was breaking around their battles, but nobody had time to worry about it. There were so many invaders that many had stopped trying to collect the bodies and had started simply throwing them in piles when they cleared a group. Nobody was fighting alone. It was too dangerous to risk being surrounded or tripped by the frog creatures. "Carl, we need fewer statues and more stabbing," Kara complained as she failed yet again to tear through the immortal ranked octopus thing. They should have enough statues to create a healing net over the district now, so Carl flew up over the guild house, then upgraded the gargoyles defending the property from overlord to mythic rank. It might be overkill for Drod on a normal day, but today it was necessary to keep the house safe. Then he used the Amulet of Destruction to increase Avatar to the Immortal rank. The first level of the Immortal rank, that was, Carl could sense that there was more than one stage to the rank, but they weren't split by separate blessings, just some sort of understanding or power. The giant calamari, as Kara called their opponent, felt like it was one sub-rank above Carl. Difficult, but not impossible, for him to fight with an immortal rank transformation and epic constitution. The lack of immortal ranked skills would be a downside to fighting the octopus creature, but Carl noticed that Kara actually had an effective attack. Void Blast wasn't at the immortal rank, but the creature's resistance against the spell was so low that the damage reduction was hardly noticeable. Hawk broke off for a moment to roast a group of frogs that were attacking locals on the ground. Dark fire caused the creatures to wither in a matter of seconds, and Hawk mocked them as he tossed the bodies in his space. "Tomorrow I will have an entire mountain of frog legs in every flavor imaginable." The bird insisted. "You're not wrong. There are so many of them out there already, and more are coming through the portals." Kara agreed. Beneath them, Carl felt their surroundings twist as an illusionary domain was formed, and then elevated to mythic rank as Opal's power soared. "I was in the middle of something. How dare you interrupt?" Opal's mental voice echoed through the area, just before a glowing elfin figure with the same gossamer wings as Opal's appeared in front of the guild house. It was an illusion, but enhanced with an incredibly potent barrier of some sort that made it look real even to Carl. New shared skill gained, Reality Warp. The Reality Warp, epic grade mythic rank illusion spell. Illusions within an illusionary domain become solid, dealing mental and physical damage to targets. For a moment, Dana prepared to celebrate their incoming reinforcements. Then the source of Opal's rage flickered through her mind for a moment before the butterfly stuffed it away. "I've changed my mind. I'm not celebrating the group's resident busybody having a meltdown over her observation of Lotus and Ophelia's date night being interrupted," she muttered. Opal didn't care that Dana was not impressed. She would show these obnoxious frogs what upset really looked like. The Ophelia and Lotus show was her favorite daytime entertainment, and they had completely ruined today's episode with some nonsensical security lockdown. There wasn't even any kissing before she was pulled away. Carl laughed as Opal's frustrations reached him. Dana could sort out Opal's habit of sneakily observing everything. The butterfly wouldn't listen to him without ordering her, and Kara would help her find ways out of even the best-worded orders. With the added illusionary armies inside Opal's illusionary domain effect, the frog population around the guildhouse was quickly being decimated. In fact, it was so effective that they were working to secure some of the portals so that nothing else could come through. Now that they had a grasp of the situation, they could send in mages to try to collapse the interdimensional portals, effectively ending the attack. Above the main battle, Carl was learning that it was not easy to fight an octopus. This one didn't appear to have any blind spots, and those tentacles could attack or defend at any angle. It didn't matter that there were 3 of them attacking, as the creature had 8 limbs, and it could fly fast enough that it wasn't helpless against Hawk's attacks. It certainly wasn't happy about being set on fire, but with the damage reduction of the Immortal Blessing, its natural healing was slowly regenerating flesh and putting out the flames. Unholy corrosion made the flames immune to holy element healing, but regeneration was not holy element. In fact, Carl didn't see a single healer anywhere in this invasion. Your weak faction cannot defend against my master. The octopus informed Carl, its voice broadcast telepathically. My faction might be weaker than yours, but we can still defend. Look below you, we are closing the portals. Soon, your assault will be over, and the city will be feasting on frog legs. Carl retorted, unsure if the creature spoke dragon. The octopus shifted colors to a mottled red that Carl took as annoyed, but there was nothing that it could do to stop the tide of the battle from turning against the invaders. Rampage had increased Carl's damage enough that the immortal octopus damage reduction was completely negated now, and Ray was living up to every letter of the word Rampage. Her battle looked more like a blender as she tore through the redwood sprawl, rescuing the weaker district of the city from the invaders. The governor was with her, as the district was the furthest from where the adventurers had arrived, so very few had made it across the river yet, and the numbers of frog monsters were growing. Carl snapped his jaws and bit the end of an errant tentacle off, causing the octopus to release a psychic shriek that had people below covering their ears, and Kara raging. As soon as she found this thing's eyes, she was going to claw them out. Then, a flame-covered rend attack completely severed one of the creature's tentacles, and the octopus bolted for the portal. Don't you dare! You are my calamari. Kara raged. The octopus flickered between a terrified beige and bright red, and Carl realized that it could understand her thoughts. At least Carl knew that it had a good reason to be irate with Kara and Hawk. They had been planning ways to cook it since before the first attack landed. Once it was clear of the imminent attacks, the octopus simply teleported and vanished through the portal it had taken here. The portal closed behind it, and Hawk shrieked as he doused the area in fire. He had plans for that thing. However, if he couldn't have calamari, he could at least try something new with all these frog legs. That was brilliant. He had a nice spice rub that would go well with frog. But first, he needed more. Carl transformed back to his usual form so that he could fight in the streets, but went all the way to the far side of the city to assist Ray. A few more groups had come this way, having realized that it was a treasure trove of mythic frogs. But there were still far too many, and 2/3 of the buildings had been destroyed, with civilians running for anything that seemed like it might be safe. The death toll within Drod was going to be horrific when the battle ended, and impossible to count, as the giant frogs could swallow most of the smaller demons whole. Now that he was back in his usual fighting form, Carl switched the target of the Amulet of Destruction to be the disintegration spell cast on the Blade of Champions as a barrier. At immortal rank, it was unlikely to be dispelled or broken while attacking the frogs, and it would cut much more smoothly, saving him time while he worked to save who he could. Don't gather near the river. There are portals in the water. Carl warned as a group of demons ran past him, fleeing from a group of the mythic frogs. Mr. Carl, is there a safe zone? One of them shouted back. We're expanding out from the guild house, but I came ahead to try to salvage something in the sprawl. Carl explained. The man gave a sad shake of his head. There isn't much left to save. Just wipe them out, and we will do our best to survive. The most effective way to remove the frogs would be area spells, but he would level the entire city if he tried doing things that way. The damage was already excessive, and the buildings of the Redwood Sprawl weren't in great shape to begin with. An arc of disintegration cut a pair of frogs in half, giving the small group room to flee for safety as everything else turned its attention to Carl. The frogs weren't intelligent creatures, and in the immortal realm, they would hardly be considered a major threat. But here in such high numbers they had essentially depopulated a city in under an hour. To prevent others from claiming the bounty on the frogs, Carl tossed the kills into Hawk's space, so he could roast them later, and kept moving. He didn't miss the fact that he was slowly gathering a following of wounded locals, people who had survived the first round of attacks which had leveled their homes. They had all decided that it was safer to be within sight of someone who could actually kill the frogs, even if it meant being out in the open. Then they came around a corner and found themselves face to face with the governor, who also had a large following of people. "Here, take this healing totem and guard the survivors. I will keep clearing the city," Carl instructed. "Thank you, guild leader. Your friend Ray is somewhere near the wall with her army of undead." Governor Shin replied slowly, exhausted by his efforts. "My forces are closer to the guild house, but we've called for over 100 mythic warriors from Xylaz to come and help. They're working their way here, so if you can just hold on for another half hour, they should reach you." With the followers now somewhat safe, Carl moved on, then called the Epic Guard and the Haint to him so that he could have support at his sides, without greatly reducing the number of fighters on the other side of town. For a moment, the Epic Golems felt insulted that Carl hadn't called them. There were 2 of them as well, so they wouldn't deplete the force any more than the other 2. Then they realized that without being at Carl's side, they were free to just do as they pleased, within the scope of their orders. Kill the invaders. Rescue the civilians. Simple, but with so much leeway. To a pair of dark elven kings, that was practically winning the lottery. They could terrorize the civilians as much as they wanted, as long as they rescued them after. And as an added bonus, they would be dismissed after the battle, so they wouldn't have to listen to anyone whine about their methods. Though, if they could make their way across town, they could go challenge Lady Ray to a killing contest. That would be even more fun than terrorizing strangers. While the 2 dark elves were considering whether it would be going too far to escort the civilians back to safety collared on a slave gang rope. For their own safety, of course, Carl was pondering a profound insight about advancement. One of the first things that he had ever been told about gaining power was that people eventually got complacent or lost motivation, and that was the end of their career. They would end up stuck in a rut, never advancing, and burn away their potential. But today, seeing Opal advance because she was upset that the battle had interrupted the chances of Ophelia and Lotus going on a steamy date, he was beginning to wonder if that was only half the story. Yes, getting stuck in a rut, or losing faith in yourself could stop you from advancing. But at some point, it might actually be necessary to want and need to advance. Kara routinely advanced because it would be boring not to. Hawk often advanced out of pure frustration. Opal had just advanced out of unfettered rage. So, as all of them were pushing the limits of their species, could that actually be the trigger, the last missing ingredient to the advancement formula? There was a mining song about a man named Big John who had once held up a broken mine timber, propping up a collapsing mine, so his fellows could escape. A feat of heroism that should have been physically impossible. But in the context of the system, what about it wasn't physically impossible for a normal man? That overwhelming surge of emotion and motivation could be the key to advancing. And if it was, then they might have actually done their children a disservice by making the academy too safe and too well organized. Only when things went wrong, and they were pushed to their limits, could the students really reach within to get past the bottleneck. Ray thought that Carl was absolutely right. Torturing and terrifying the students was truly the right way to go about it. Look at how well her baby rogue had grown under the threat of being captured the moment that she began to slack off. That reminded her, once this fight is over, open me a portal back to the academy. I need to go see Sybil. Carl and Dana both laughed as the epic golems mentally pleaded to be allowed to go with her. One ray was enough to terrify a baby rogue. But the 3 of them together was enough to terrify the entire academy. They might even be able to teach the children something new while they were at it. Carl could sense that the other teams were getting close to the river, so they would soon enter the Redwood Sprawl or what was left of it. However, the Dark Elven Kings were faster, and they were at the north gates, fighting their way towards Ray at breakneck speed, aiming to create piles of bodies larger than what the spider and her golems managed. That seemed impossible, as Ray had the spectral knights with her, and they were slaughtering the frogs in a single strike. But the dark elves had ranged blade techniques that could take out multiple targets at once, and they were faster to release their skills. Carl was about to relax and order his golems forward when he sensed more disturbances overhead. The supreme-ranked creature that Matilda was fighting had stumbled, and a gout of black blood fell toward the ground, then vanished into Ray's space before it could be polluted by the rubble. The two supreme-ranked combatants vanished in a wave of chaotic energy, marking Matilda's temporary victory in their battle of wills. From inside the Chaos Realm, she would have the advantage. And she wasn't alone. Kara had shifted to go assist her. Carl frowned. The battle between two supreme-ranked creatures was not something that the Badger should be getting involved in. The problem was that Carl couldn't easily move to the Chaos Plane to go get her. He did have a skill for that, but it was 100 skill points. Incredibly expensive and possibly not worth the loss when he could use them on Blessing of Skill to create new skill books. That was 2 artifact grade skills or 4 epic grade skills. Not an easy choice. No need to save me. The Calamarian chief is about to get chopped and diced. Can fight, but it can't properly move here. It doesn't understand the rules. Kara explained. If you let it injure you, you are in big trouble. Carl warned her. Got it, boss. I will wait patiently. If Carl wasn't suspicious of her intentions before, he was now. Kara never waited patiently for anything, even when she had seen it in a vision and knew what was coming. No, especially if she knew what was coming, because then the suspense was gone. With their leader gone, the portals began to destabilize. But they didn't simply disappear, they were fluctuating at the other side, and they had begun dumping random creatures from the immortal plane out into Drod City. Most of them only looked around for a few seconds, then went back and closed the portal behind them. Whatever shit show was going on here was not their problem, and they had no intentions of getting involved in someone else's mess when the whole city smelled like chaos and supreme rank blood. It was a presence that no denizen of the immortal realms would mistake, as a supreme-ranked creature was likely to be the overlord of an entire world. Not something that they wanted to mess with, especially if something here could make it bleed. Others were either unable or unwilling to go back to where they had come from. Some of the portals had dumped out the occupants of slave pens full of creatures under immortal rank, others had opened in the open ocean, and the creatures that were capable of returning to the ocean, or who could swim and found no major threats, simply stayed. Not everything that was powerful was sentient. Some just wanted decent feeding grounds and fewer predators. With Kara gone to the Chaos Plane, Carl focused on using Nullify to close the portals which were no longer supported by their creator. Transforming back into the avatar of the World Dragon made it easier to close the portals, as the dragon body was more attuned to realm-traversing magic. It also allowed him to cast Nullify from above with a much better view of his targets. 10 at a time, Carl closed the portals, and the invasion slowly began to trickle to a halt, with no new creatures appearing, and the myths from Xylaz clearing what was left. Carl could tell that some of them were upset that they had arrived late and didn't get as many bounties as they wanted. But after seeing the death and destruction in the city, nobody was in any mood to petition for Carl to slow down the effort to end the invasion. There wasn't much left in the city that wasn't at least damaged, and most of the Redwood Sprawl was completely destroyed. The Frostfire Gate region was the most intact, as that was where Carl and the others had started from. But the palace was also mostly intact. It had taken some visible damage, but it was a workday, so the district guardians and the city governor would have been at the palace when everything started. The docks were also partially intact. That was where Sapphire had been shopping when the attack started, and the Blue Dragon had carefully gathered everyone that she could into a building with an eternal lightning barrier over it. Carl was nearly finished closing the portals that had opened in the ocean when he noticed a large rock floating in the water. Now, rocks weren't normally interesting, but they normally didn't float either. So, he flew down to get a better view, and realized that it wasn't a rock but a huge egg. I bet this one is a brother. Remy cheered. It had better be a brother, we're outnumbered. Hawk agreed. Can it be a calm sister to teach the others how to behave? Thor joked, then began to laugh at Ray and Kara's annoyed responses. Why will it be either? Is there something special about weird eggs? Tian asked, confused. Oh, right. You weren't here for all of it. Collecting eggs is how Carl got most of us. And this looks like a promising egg. It came from the immortal realm, which means it's from something that can survive there long enough to reproduce. If it can survive in the immortal realm, it isn't too weak. If it's not weak, it should have cool skills, and that means it might be interesting enough to be one of us. Remy explained. Tian understood. Interesting beasts belonged with them. Where else could they grow up big and strong? But was it going to be a strong enough one to grow with them? How did you even tell from an egg? Tian came out to inspect the huge gray thing. It didn't look like an egg. It wasn't even an oval. It was kind of lumpy. But there was definitely something inside, and it was mythic rank. If it was mythic as a baby, it should be as strong as him or stronger. It came from a strong place, though, so it might have gotten a bump just from being in that place. Still, it shouldn't be too weak. What do we do with it? Does it just get an automatic space? He asked. Carl laughed at his confusion. I have one space available to form, and I have a skill that will let me add more if I need them. I can make a space for it if we're going to keep the egg. Tian rolled it over. It looked like stone, but it wasn't from the earth element. Maybe nature, but not quite normal nature element. Could that be because it came from another world? It was a very curious floating object. Even more interesting, it seemed to pulsate when he spun it in the water. I think that you're making it seasick, Thor noted. Are we making wagers on what it's going to be? Kara asked as she watched the ongoing fight between Matilda and the Takoyaki Supreme. Shouldn't it be a squid or octopus? They're the strongest things we've seen today, Thor pondered. But it appeared after the portals went crazy, so it might be from somewhere random. Remy countered. It floats, so it should be from a water place, right? Tian asked. I don't think that's how it works. Water creature eggs are usually hidden on the bottom where they're hard to burn. Hawk complained. Dana's mind joined the conversation. Are you picking a new sibling? Where did you even find it? It's floating in the ocean. It came out of a portal, and we don't know what it is. Except that it's a mythic rank egg. Tian replied happily. So, naturally, you need to keep it and find out what is inside. See, Dana gets it. Put it in a space and let's see what we win. Kara cheered. Carl focused on the beast spaces to form a new one at the mythic rank and filled it with mana, so that the new arrival would be comfortable when they hatched. Drumroll, please. DUH, DUH, DH Kara narrated as Carl prepared the space. A gentle touch transferred the egg into the newly created beast space, and everyone held their breath, waiting for the notification. Partner bond accepted. New beast bonded False Island Giant Turtle. Name Leo. Rank Mythic. Shared skill. Implacable. The False Island Giant Turtle is eternal. Sleep, confusion, and stamina loss effects do not affect the False Island Giant Turtle. Oh, that is a good one. Do you see that, Dana Mage? The Carl will no longer ever run out of stamina or get sleepy. Opal cheered. There is something wrong with your brain. I am restricting your reading materials. The empty space began to change, with the formless void slowly turning into a large island surrounded by warm salt water. A few trees formed on the island, but the others immediately began to make offerings, placing plants that they thought Leo might like in his space. The egg hadn't hatched yet, but the plants shifted to grow evenly spaced around the island. Not even hatched yet, but he's got a decent sense of decor. Remy noted. The egg rocked a little, as if the occupant was half asleep, and not in any hurry to escape their confinement. Then, the thick gray shell tore, and a deep green turtle's head emerged. Leo looked around at his domain, then nodded and began to tear a larger hole in the leathery shell of the egg with his beak. This is just agonizingly slow, Remy noted. I am a turtle, not a crocolisk. Why are you in such a hurry? Leo replied, even his mental voice slow and measured, with a slight drawl. Do you like swamps? Remy asked hopefully. Swamps are nice. Warm and earthy. Not as good as clean fresh water, though. Remy smiled. The turtle got it. The swamp was the best place to be, but getting muddy sucked. Leo chuckled softly as he freed himself of the shell, then floated into the air. I have ways around getting muddy. Remy giggled, and then transformed into spirit snake form, which could float above the ground just as easily as the giant turtle. He's a crunchy Remy. Hawk gasped. Leo gave the bird a confused look. While they both had levitation abilities, didn't the bird also have them? His flames would keep him aloft. There was no need to flap his wings just to hover. He means that we're both floating water element creatures. Hawk has a personal enmity with water magic that stems from repressed childhood trauma. Remy explained. When she put it that way, it felt like an insult, Hawk decided. But this new brother didn't seem half bad. He might be from the water, but he wasn't really watery. I'm not a water element creature, you know. I might live on islands and in the ocean, but my innate elemental affinities are for nature and gravity, not water. Leo explained. Thor got excited as he heard that news. This might be another brother who appreciated a proper smashing post. Enough slacking. How is the battle in the city going? Let your new brother get used to his surroundings and have breakfast while you work, Carl demanded. Kara was still engrossed in the battle between Matilda and the seafood special to be. But Ray quickly got back on track and continued to clear out the last remaining beasts that had come through the portals. The only issue was that not all of what came through appeared to be hostile. Some of them were trying to hide among the population, and some were simply fleeing the city either by land or sea. In the immortal realm, those who could not reach immortality held no value at all, and those who were not born immortal but reached immortality were only viewed as being marginally better than animals in the eyes of the most powerful. Having the misfortune to be trapped under the rule of any such creature was a nightmare that they were glad to escape, even if they knew nothing about this world. The aftermath of the event would have wide-ranging effects on the whole nation, but Drod was in a terrible situation right now, with the capital city destroyed, a large portion of the population dead or missing, and now potentially dozens of powerful invasive beasts loose in the wilderness. However, the portals were all closed now, and the fight in the city was all over except the cleanup and rescue efforts. Carl followed his senses to help dig out people buried in the rubble, a task made easier by the fact that he was in the redwood sprawl, and most of the buildings had been single-story wooden structures. Even though they had collapsed on their occupants, only the most heavily injured were unable to free themselves. Remy even made a healing totem for Carl to carry so that anyone nearby would recover, and could call for help if needed. Outside the city walls, the situation would be worse, but the recovery efforts even easier, as most of the housing was tin shacks once you got further away from the walls. The destroyed buildings had hidden them from the frogs, who relied more on their sense of sight and movement than their sense of smell, so those who were trapped were less likely to have been pursued. The frogs had shown no intention of digging when there was still more food at surface level. Carl pulled the rubble of a ruined house to one side, revealing the cellar stairs, and a group of obsession demons cautiously stared back at him, unsure of whether he was a friend or enemy. For about 3 seconds before they realized who it was. Mr. Carl. I knew that the Darklight host would come to save the sprawl. One of the young men cheered. The monsters are almost all gone. We're just searching for any that might be hiding, while we look for the wounded. If you head across the river toward the guild house, you'll find more supplies waiting. There isn't much left in this region, Carl explained. Oh, thank you, guild leader. We hid as soon as the fighting started, and then the building collapsed, so we just waited. This attack, it's worse than anything I've seen before. But Drod will rebuild. I'm certain of it.